On Tuesday, voters will head to the polls for Wisconsin's spring primary election. They'll consider local races, referendum questions, statewide ballot questions, and their pick in the presidential primary. Right now, a grassroots effort is underway to get Democrats to vote uninstructed in the presidential primary. There are similar efforts in Michigan and Minnesota as advocates call on the White House to stop sending military aid to Israel as the war continues in Gaza. Political reporter Darielle Fair sat down with a spokesperson for the campaign.
And here with us now we have Hala Ahmed, one of the lead organizers for Listen to Wisconsin, a campaign effort urging people to vote uninstructed in the April 2nd presidential primary. Thank you so much for joining us, Hala.
Thanks for having me.
Can you talk a little bit about the purpose of this campaign and what messaging you're trying to get across by telling Democratic voters not to cast their ballot for Joe Biden?
So Listen to Wisconsin emerged as a grassroots effort that it represents multi-faith, multi-generational members of our community across Wisconsin who are people of conscience. They feel that they cannot, in good conscience, vote in November for any candidate on the ballot who does not take serious action to end the genocide in Gaza. And so the Listen to Wisconsin Uninstructed campaign comes at a time in which the situation in Gaza is escalating to a severe humanitarian crisis that is man-made and U.S. funded and supported by this administration. The April 2nd primary is an opportunity for voters to send a clear message to President Biden, to the White House, to every elected official that a key margin of voters and voters across Wisconsin take seriously the issue of Palestine and do not want to be complicit in the genocide in Gaza. We have a few specific demands, and they involve a permanent and unconditional ceasefire, ending military aid to Israel, reinstating full humanitarian aid and aid to UNRWA, because it's the best institution to deliver much needed food aid and health aid, and also ending the siege to take permanent steps towards peace in the region.
In previous elections, we've seen a theme of voters choosing no preference on their ballot. When President Barack Obama, was on the ballot in 2012, over 200,000 no preference votes were received in North Carolina's primary that year. What do you say to critics who argue that those choosing to vote uninstructed in their state's primary elections could be doing so for other reasons, not just to support your campaign?
So, in every election cycle, there are some people who vote uninstructed or uncommitted, depending on what state you're in. And it is essentially a vote of no confidence, or a vote in which you want to express that no candidate on the ballot represents your views. You want them to represent the voter interests writ large. And in this case, because there's such a concerted campaign around this issue, and we know that our communities have been organizing, over 60 different organizations across the state have been organizing against the war in Gaza for the past 6 months, many elected officials as well. We think it's really clear that this is part of a larger movement to vote uninstructed on April 2nd in order to send a message to the White House that we want to see an end to this war and we want to see serious efforts towards peace. And I would say that the other piece of it is the nomination. Biden already has the number of delegates he needs from every other primary across the country to be the Democratic nominee. At the same time, at the Democratic National Convention, they determined their policy priorities, and President Biden right now still has serious choices to make in a deeply escalating humanitarian humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, and every day an increasing death toll. And we think that the April 2nd primary is therefore a really essential way to send a very specific message about policy change that has nothing to do with political figures. We believe in holding all political figures, regardless of ideology, accountable to what voters demand. And that's basically the message. We believe that they should listen to Wisconsinites, and they should, consider this important segment of their constituency that wants to see serious efforts towards peace.
Hala, you spoke a little bit about how Biden is showing up in the polls across other primaries and states. Here in Wisconsin, Biden lost by a little over 20,000 votes. Are there any concerns that your campaign may give former President Donald Trump some leverage? Trump has implemented pro-Israel foreign policies in previous years. Is there any concern on what that looks like going forward?
We have made really clear in our campaign and in all of our materials and across all of the different communities that are pushing for this, that this is about policy change right now. And no voter who votes their conscience in this election should necessarily vote the same way in November. And the truth is that voters feel so disenfranchised right now that many of them won't show up in November because they cannot conscience the options they have on the ballot if no serious change is made to end this genocide in Gaza and end U.S. complicity and military aid to Israel if they're not going to comply with U.S. or international law. But the other piece of it is that, the voters who support voting uninstructed on April 2nd believe that no matter where you come from or what you look like, everybody deserves safety and justice and dignity. And we want to see our government resources directed towards that principle. And we think that, Gaza, the issue of Gaza is not so far away from us when when we send billions of dollars every year to Israel, and now we've sent millions more and armed this conflict, when most Americans don't support this war. And that is not a good representation of democracy. It's really harmful, and we want to make sure we bring voters back into the polls to make their voices heard for policy change now, before they have to make a choice in November.
Hala Ahmad, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Still ahead, the 2 constitutional amendments on your ballot Tuesday that could shake up future elections if they pass.